It sounds trite, but actually I read a fortune cookie at the time. You're not. This fortune cookie changed my life. The fortune cookie said,
"Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I am your host, Mary Shenouda."
Max.
What's going on?
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
It's so cool to see that you've launched this. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
Love it.
Of all the people who've interviewed me, you're my favorite.
Really?
Yes.
I love that.
The most natural, the most thoughtful, the most dynamic in questions. I want to say you did your research, but you know me. Like, you ever go on a podcast and you can tell someone just read like the bio of your website, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna fall flat. But you're also naturally charming and warm, and so many other things that I hope to tease out in our session here.
I love it. Well, I loved getting the opportunity that you gave me on my podcast to interview you, because I feel like I was able to tease out like a really unique side of your skill set that probably doesn't often get tapped, because you are so, you work one-on-one with such high-level people, but you also have this like encyclopedic knowledge of all the ingredients that you work with, right? So it was great to get to like reveal that.
Yeah, you were one of the first, if not still one of the only, who have had me on their show and did that. Usually people will not dive into like what it is I really do. They just talk about, oh, tell us how you were sick and you got better, but not what I really do with my clients. So thank you for that.
Anytime.
But now the tables are turned. You're here. People know you as a podcast host. They know you as an author, musician, wannabe musician.
Yeah. Struggling, remorseful musician of sorts. No, I play.
Filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And you started out, as far as your career, correct me if I'm wrong, we can go before this, but you were a TV host.
Yeah.
Before TV host, what got you to that point?
I started college on a pre-med track, so I'd always loved health and medicine and science, to the degree that when I started college, I was a biology major, and I did that for about half of my undergraduate career. And I did pretty well. I was in the honors program, and I got A's in my sciences, but I was getting C's and D's in the easy classes, like the required liberal arts courses that everybody had to take, that most people would get A's in, but I got D's because I would just never show up. And so that led to a really mediocre GPA. And I also at that point realized that I had skills beyond just an interest and an aptitude for science. I was a good storyteller. I was starting to hone these creative storytelling chops.
Where did the storytelling come from? Were you like an imaginative kid? Were you telling lots of lies to your parents to get out of things?
No, I was. I had a very keen design aesthetic early on, and I was like an early adopter of the internet, and I used to like get paid as a teenager to design websites, like before that was even like a popular thing.
Back when we were coding on MySpace?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I'm like an autodidact. I'm a lifelong, I've taught myself a myriad of different things that now all, I use day to day. I'm a proficient in Photoshop, I'm proficient in film editing. And this is like before me switching to a film major in college. I actually I've just really always kind of had a learner's mindset, and I've always been very curious, and I've always been very adept at teaching myself things that I'm passionate about and interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so halfway through college, I also kind of realized that I was like obsessed with music, and I was obsessed with film at the time, like good cinema, in a way that I just felt like other people kind of like, they enjoy good movies, who doesn't? But like it would get under my skin, and I would think about the themes in movies and the storytelling and the cutting and the music and the symphony of components that add up to a man-made thing that gives you goosebumps, that makes you feel. So I just love that. And I didn't think that I was going to get to tap into that or flesh that out, continuing to go down this like medical route. And also I didn't think that I was going to be competitive with my GPA. And thankfully I had parents that weren't pressuring me to make any decision either which way. And so I ended up double majoring in film and psychology with a focus on documentary filmmaking, because I was more interested in exposing stories that I felt were important,
right,
as opposed to fiction. One thing led to another. That ended up with me getting a job working for Al Gore post-college graduation. Okay. So a dream job. So it's not just a regular job. Like I didn't just get like a 9 to 5.
How did you get that opportunity?
I made a film as an undergraduate that basically beat out thousands of other applicants around the country. So
what was the film about?
It was about my life as an undergraduate that I made with my best friend at the time. And it was about trying to reconcile two interests that I had in particular through the medium of film. And one was Eastern mysticism and spirituality. I was really into that. Yeah.
That is not what I thought you were going to say.
But it gets better. So I was trying to reconcile that with my newfound adoration for the pleasures of the flesh in college. So I was trying to reconcile my appreciation for among other things, the female form and art and music as this kid, basically, who's just like going out and seeing the big world for the first time.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I was also kind of like a thinker, and I had this like depth, and I was reading books by Jiddu Krishnamurti at the time. It was very puzzling to me that all the great religious traditions have always said that to find God, you have to abstain from the pleasures of the flesh to reach enlightenment, quote unquote. And I felt very much that this was like a totally ridiculous student film, by the way, so I'm not endorsing these ideas now necessarily, but at the time I felt very much that why can't you find God through sex, through art, through music, through film, through friendship? Mm-hmm. So the film was kind of like this like crazy, ridiculous student film that was like an homage to that.
Does it exist anywhere?
No.
On purpose.
On purpose.
And this caught the attention of Al Gore's team or whoever was going through that. Okay.
Yeah. So the head of programming of this TV network that Al Gore was behind, so one executive underneath Al Gore was the head of programming, who has built a career. He's known for picking unconventional talent that end up having these illustrious, incredible careers in the field of journalism. So not just like TV hosting, but journalist. He gave Anderson Cooper his
the
first
critical
job.
Thinking, the storytelling, the things that go beyond just like sitting in front of some teleprompter.
Right. So people that read my Wikipedia page might think, oh, I just did this like film thing and TV. But I was like, actually, for 6 years I worked under Al Gore in this, this journalism department.
Do you know my association with Al Gore?
Tell me.
Not as dope as yours.
I want to hear.
He had an app called Push Pop on global warming.
Huh.
And it was sold to Facebook, and it's a really cool app. And I'm the hand model.
Whoa.
In the video. And so when they sold, cool. I was like, oh, I played a hand.
You're underselling yourself.
In that. And that was just pure accident, because I used to always joke among my friends how much I love my hands. My nails need to be done a certain way. And my friend who works in media and print and advertising called me in a panic one day. This is when I lived in San Francisco. She's like, please tell me you're home. I'm like, well, yeah, what's going on? She's like, our hand model didn't show up today. It's your time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's time? She's like, get your butt down here. We're going to make you a hand model.
I love that.
And I went in, I was doing the like, move it this way and go this way. And it's actually quite hard to be a hand model, because you see just the camera and the hands, but you have to like sit in a certain way to get the shot right.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then the first time I did could you please open the app for us? I opened, they're like, oh, can you do that again? And I look at my friend Brooke, I'm like, this is ridiculous. She's trying not to laugh. And then I got a legitimate like paycheck for it. And we all went out, we spent all the money on drinks to celebrate me being a hand model.
That's so great.
Yeah, I think yours is cooler. 6 years.
I don't know. Different strokes for different folks.
So you did that for 6 years. Is this when you were with Current TV, or was that?
Yeah, that was Current TV. Yeah.
Okay.
That was.
And you had your own show, or you were co-hosting?
I was co-hosting with my friend who I got hired with in college. Yeah, it was an incredible job. We were like on cloud nine. What's
it like co-hosting? What's it like balancing screen time with another talent?
Yeah, we had a great rapport. I mean, we were very close friends, and we also are we're similar, but we were different in the sense that like, he's kind of like this uncontained, or was kind of like this uncontained like ball of energy. He was South American, so he was like big, boisterous, like talk with his hands and things like that. And I'm, what you might infer from my content today is I'm very kind of like rational and, like kind of what do they call it? Like the straight man, like dry sense of humor, very like grounded. And so we had a good on camera.
Sort of grounded.
So it
was a good balance.
It was a really good balance. Yeah. Yeah. And we had, our interests were very aligned for most of, I would say that time. And we excelled, we did, really well. And we got a lot of great press, and we kind of like had this entrepreneurial approach about that job, because there was no guarantee that job was going to lead to a career.
6 years is a long time.
Yeah.
That's a good run.
Yeah, it was a great run. But ultimately the network didn't succeed. And there was a bit of a deferred existential quagmire that it left me in the sense that when that job opportunity ended, I was neither famous nor rich. So I didn't really have like an obvious next step.
Sure. Is that when we met or is that before we met?
It was around that time. So I was like, I wasn't really making any money and I didn't really have, I had this amazing job post-college.
Right.
But 6 years later, what I had done professionally was on camera, like TV hosting / journalism. But I didn't necessarily want to go into journalism the way that most people think about it. I don't really care about politics or even entertainment journalism. Like I don't care about celebrity or anything like that. And I wasn't a TV host. I wasn't about to go and host like a music show or something like that, So it left me in this weird place where I didn't really know what my next step was going to be.
Give me the timeline, because we met through Nick Onken, shout out, over FaceTime. I just called Nick. We were talking. He put the camera on you. Meet my friend Max. Hey, what's up? And then I was in Erewhon right around the time it opened up in Venice. And I was like, is your name Max? And we became fast friends.
So funny.
And I still have the video. It was a fun video when we met. I remember this time period, you were a lot of like soul searching, what I would do next, being really open about feedback, being really vulnerable about your insecurity with what to do next.
Yeah.
There was no podcast. There was no Genius Foods. Was there already Breadhead though? I feel like that was already in the works.
That came a few years later. So that I remember I began the Kickstarter campaign for that in, I believe it was January 2015. It could have been 2014, but I'm pretty sure it was January 2015. And so I was working on it for about a year prior to launching. So about January 2014 is when I decided. Current ended around 2011. 2013, 2014 is when I went all in on health, science, communication, and had the idea to do this documentary, which then was called Breadhead, now is called Little Empty Boxes.
Yeah, we're going to get to that too.
And so in that 3-year period were probably some of the darkest years of my life because I didn't really know what I was going to do career-wise. I was essentially unemployable from the standpoint of like a corporate job. Not that that's even what I had wanted or would have wanted, but I was having thoughts about like massive regret about not having gone through that medical school route,
I have a distinct memory. This is before Pause and all those places. There was some other cryo place we went to go visit, and you were having one of those days where you were being very vulnerable and where you were, and there's us were waiting in the waiting room, and you're like laid out on the couch, just kind of like defeated, being like, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you'll figure it out. Like,
yeah.
I don't see a lot of people be that open about their doubt. And I don't think if you were that open that you would have been able to get to where you are today. Because as much as you think you're this stoic, straight guy, everything is just black or white, you are a cat owner by default. You're full of emotion and softness and vulnerability.
No, your boy gets emotional and vulnerable. Like I definitely do. I have my moments. I mean, I think, and that's also where the musician in me comes from. I definitely feel the feels. And yeah, I mean, that period was like really, from a career standpoint alone, was like really dark. And, I think I, at a certain point, wanted to see if I could make it as a musician, which I couldn't. There was no shot of that. And I just didn't have I just hadn't been doing it long enough. And and it's so that wasn't going to happen, although I enjoyed doing it.
And you still do it for fun.
Yeah, I still do it for fun. Yeah.
So you're in this moment or in this season of doubt, regret, what if, what could be, what do I do? And
the dissonance was particularly because, like for 6 years, I had people kissing my ass, like as if I'm going to be the next greatest thing in Hollywood because I'm working for Al Gore. I've got this incredible mission on my shoulders and on TV, and I've had all this press. And then from one minute to the next, I'm broke. I've got where is my next check coming from? My agent at the time had dropped me essentially. I had signed.
Where is he now? Look at me now.
She was the biggest C word. I mean, seriously, dropped me. And then, but the grand irony is that I'm not going to name her, But she went on to launch some kind of like, she left the agency and apparently she went on to launch some like stupid fitness company. And
not just a fitness company.
Yeah.
Stupid fitness company.
I'm just waiting for the email from somebody on our team to come through asking for a collab so I can.
You should do it though.
Yeah.
When it comes through, you should do it. You should be graceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. I think you'd enjoy it. You can do a bunch of like quips while you're doing the collab.
She was very rude though. I mean, I was like, there was a lot of weird stuff. I mean, you kind of hear sometimes in Hollywood that, you know, people are very much about like, what can you do for me today? And then the minute you cease to be able to provide value, they turn their backs on you. And that I very much experienced that.
I struggle with that. I seem to mostly get phone calls when somebody needs something with their health, or they see who I work with and they want an introduction. But I get called in case of the emergency. I don't get called for the fun shenanigans, and it hurts me. But it's also like something that I just have accepted, especially in the space that we're in the city that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing that you could do is just don't be like that, and also just keep going forward, you know? And eventually, you know, you're going to end up seeing those people in your rearview mirror, which I have, you know?
Yeah.
For pretty much everybody that was like that to me.
Right.
You know?
I've got a few more on my list that I'm waiting for. But so you're in that moment. What I actually don't even remember when you started posting about the content you post about now. Do you remember when you started to dedicate to that? And were you doing it on your own, or were you hopping on with friends that are doing that too and sort of mirroring what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, so at the time, Instagram wasn't around. It was really kind of Facebook was the primary medium. So in that period where I was like barely treading water, trying to figure out what I was going to, and depressed about my career. And also I was seeing a lot of people that I had worked with at Current continue to do well. You know,
I remember that really got to you.
Yeah, because like some of them had kind of been singularly focused on journalism and whatever, you know? And so like they kept going and I was like, shit, what, you know, like, why am I the one that's now like suddenly...
And I want to highlight, you weren't doing it of why them, not me. Because I remember you asking, what is it that they're doing that I'm not doing? Like you weren't, woe is me. You were very being like, how can I put myself in a better position? Yeah, which I think some people don't do that. They're like, they get very victim mindset, and you weren't. You were very much like, okay, how can I improve? What I can do different? Right.
Well, there was never a moment where I felt the need to imitate what somebody else was doing. I've always felt very strongly, I am going to succeed. I just didn't know what that necessarily was going to look like, what success was going to look like. But I did know that there was something in me that was special and that was perhaps shrouded in, you know, the logistics of figuring out how to reveal whatever that thing is, but that it was there and I just needed to trust the process and trust myself ultimately. I remember that word trust was a big thing for me back then. I have a friend that launched a company. He was making intention bracelets for people. Yeah. I distinctly remember like for at least a year wearing one where the word was trust. And I very intentionally like resonated with that word because the key for me was just trusting in myself. Like I didn't know what it was. I didn't even see the light at the end of the tunnel. I never would have been able to predict what it is that I'm currently doing, but I just knew that I had to trust whatever it was that got me there to that point and that led to that amazing Al Gore job and all the successes that I had up until that point, that I just needed to like trust the process and trust myself.
Have you heard the quote, the light at the end of the tunnel is not the illusion, the tunnel is?
I love that.
Yeah, I think about that one a lot. I'm in a period right now where I'm like having to make some pivots, having to make some hard decisions with my business, and I'm feeling like, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? And so I have to remind myself of that quote, that the illusion is the tunnel itself. I am the light. Yeah. Going back to when you started to deliberately focus on the nutrition and health, but did you try something else between that, or you went all in on that?
No, there was a certain point where I went all in. Around that time, my mom got sick, and she, most important person in my life. I'm firstborn child in a super small family, incredibly close to my mother. She, in about 2011, 2012, so literally right after Current, was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative condition. I was spending more and more time in New York City, where I'm from, with her, and it began to dawn on me and the rest of my family that something was seriously wrong with my mom. And so I started going with her to doctor's appointments. And, you know, as I had mentioned, I'd always been obsessed with health and medicine and really, you know, I mean, super passionate from, you know, all angles, fitness, nutrition. I mean, I don't want to underappreciate the actual training that goes into becoming a medical doctor, but I had always had a photographic memory for things that I would read about disease states and medicine, just real a nerdy fascination that I've had, but it was like it stayed in my brain and I was able to like spit it out on. I don't have a photographic memory for, you know, anything else, but I'd always had like an aptitude for this to the degree that when I would talk, people would listen.
What was it like being in the doctor appointments though? Because when I have to go to the doctor's appointments with my parents, it feels like a battle sometimes. Again, not taking away from the training and what goes into being a doctor, but coming from the lens of nutrition, supplementation, and understanding disease, it's almost like they don't even want to entertain the conversation with me beyond just the diagnosis and your medication. I'm like, no, we have a lot of questions here. Because I can't lose my parents, and I'm going to lose them eventually, but hopefully not today. The smarter I seemed in the room, the more frustrated most of the doctors would be. Every once in a while, I'd get a doctor that'd be like, oh, I can have like a real conversation with you. But what was that like during that time?
Yeah, I mean, science is just asking questions. That's all science is. You know, there's a method, and you know, and that method dictates how you then, you know, undergo finding answers. But ultimately, I would go with my mom, who, you know, like any patient, you're terrified in that moment. You're in a state of fight or flight. Your adrenaline is through. You don't know how to advocate for yourself or how to ask. You know, you get these. It's like tunnel vision. You know, when you are the patient. That's really difficult. And so I was there with my mom, and I would ask all the right questions to the degree that I remember I was at the Cleveland Clinic, and I would be asked by the doctors if I was a doctor myself because of the questions that I was asking. And I would be like, no, I'm just, you know, I read everything, and I have this photographic memory, and I'm concerned about the health.
Probably read the same material they did too, and you're there for your mom. So
I'm there for my mom. I'm highly incentivized because it's the most important person in my life. So I would ask questions, and I would just be there for her to advocate for her. And so, yeah, I became like obsessed with, you know, there was nothing else that mattered to me at that point in my life. I mean, my career ended up like, I willingly put that on the back burner. Anything else that I'd been passionate about, relationships, I moved back to New York, and I put everything else kind of on hold. And I just really wanted to get to the bottom of what it was that my mom was going through. Because my mom wasn't an old woman. So an old woman or man or whatever who develops a condition like dementia, I mean, I think there's this like resignation that comes with those kinds of conditions when you're very old, because it's like, well, they've had a good life. But my mom was this beautiful young woman in the prime of her life, and I was seeing just suffer and with, you know, all the confusion that comes with that kind of a diagnosis. And
she's where you got your music love from, right? Or
yeah,
I remember
my mom,
having videos of you guys singing together.
Yeah, my mom was a big music fanatic, and so yeah, I got all that from her. I mean, my mom was an incredible mom.
So, but you started to post about that.
Yeah.
And you started to post about the association with lifestyle and dementia particularly.
Right. So I started reading as much as I could, and then as I would read, I would share on Facebook, because, you know, you could embed a link and just share. And I was like, I don't know if anybody's interested in this, but like I am. It's all I'm interested in. So, you know, I was using those tools, but ultimately, it was a series of a few revelations that I stumbled upon that really, to me, was the turning point, at which point I knew that this is something that I had to not just casually engage with, but professionally, you know, use whatever of my skills and talents and abilities that I was able to glean and hone, you know, over the years that I'd spent in Hollywood for a purpose. And some of those, you know, insights were that, one, dementia often begins in the brain decades before the first symptom. It's generally not a genetic condition, and it's also not an old person's condition, because my mom was not old, you know, and so I was like, okay, well, the only reason why I give a shit about dementia now is because my mom has it. But the oldest millennial is, I mean, at that point, we were like the oldest millennial was in their mid 30s, right? But getting up there, and I was like, if you take 30 years, which is by some indications when dementia actually starts to begin in the brain, if you subtract that from my mom's age, you would get me. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm interested in this because my mom has it, but what about all the other millennials that like don't care about it? Like I didn't prior to just a couple months ago. I need to like start sounding this alarm, because we do have this insane window of opportunity where we can intervene. And so I decided to, at that point, go all in on doing whatever it was that I could to advocate for this sort of topic, I guess you can say. And I had other career, like, I guess, aspirations, but I just realized that if you're going to be successful at anything, you have to go all in on that one thing. It sounds trite, but actually I read a fortune cookie at the time. I shit you not. This fortune cookie changed my life. And I think I was at an airport or something. Like, we had like
a fortune cookie in an airport.
Yeah, it was like I was traveling with my mom.
Serendipity.
Yeah, I was traveling with my mom.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. And I swear it was like at the equivalent. I don't know if it was like exactly a Panda Express, but it was like the equivalent, And the fortune cookie said, it was like a Confucius quote, "A person who chases two rabbits catches neither." And I was like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's the message that I needed to hear at that moment, because I was trying to chase professionally. I had all these, am I going to go back into hosting? Do I want to go to medical school? Do I want to pursue my music, which I really love? Do I want to? And I was like, no, I'm going to catch any rabbit. It's going to be this. Did
you save it?
I don't think I saved it, but I think I might have a photo of it somewhere.
I have 2 fortunes taped to that hand.
Wow.
That hand I got when I got my first corporate job when I was 19. And I brought it because I dropped out of high school and went into tech. And I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah. So I put that on my desk. And it's been stolen from me twice. Wow. And I've gotten it back. And then there's 2 fortunes on there that are very telling as to who I am. And I have them taped on there. And they're like yellow. And I think one has mold on it because they're so old. But I appreciate the fortune cookie thing, because messages are always around us.
Yeah.
And we notice them when we're ready to receive the message.
That shit changed my life. And and it manifested, like the impact that it had manifested very, like, obviously, in the sense that suddenly, like, I was on Twitter at the time, and I would post videos of, like, my favorite of music that I wanted people to check out. But from that point forward, I was like, I'm literally only going to post about health and insights that I was, like, gleaning, and studies that I was reading and things like that. And that's what I'm going to go all in on. And then sometime after that, because of my background in filmmaking on TV, I didn't have a platform at the time. So I decided to do a documentary. Now, I've never done a feature-length documentary, but I just decided that this is something that I could do on my own. Of course, I only later found out that it's insanely expensive and it requires a shit ton of personnel. And it's like the most arduous, painful process on the face of the planet, actually. And I would never do another one again unless it was, like, made easy for me. But at that point, I was like, okay, well, I can come up with this documentary. I don't know how to do a feature-length documentary, but I definitely know how to cut a 3-minute super compelling trailer. And so I made a trailer. We did a Kickstarter campaign for the project. And it ended up going, like, crazy viral. So the goal was like $75,000 to raise, which I thought was, like, an insane amount of money at that time. This is also like 10 years ago. And we ended up raising double that. And we ended up having a ton of press. And so I just saw, like, I was like, okay, that mantra that I had told myself for the prior 1.5 to 2 years to just trust myself. Well, here's evidence that I was right this whole time. That here's a topic that nobody's talking about, that people need to be talking about, and I'm the guy to do it. So that was the first project, this documentary.
And you're getting invited to be experts. And because I remember we went to Expo West, and you were doing something for Dr. Oz.
Yeah,
and,
so that came...
you were on doctors. Like, you were getting asked to do a lot of things, which is leveraging your expertise in journalism and being on camera and storytelling with the lane that you've chosen to dedicate to.
Yeah.
And you blew up fast.
Yeah,
Well, we say fast. We say faster than you were when you were trying to decide on what to do. But I still think you're just getting warmed up. But to someone that's looking at you from the outside in, you have accumulated massive success. And if you want to measure success as far as lives changed, we can't even put a number on the numbers of lives you've changed. Yeah,
I feel super grateful. I mean, it's funny. I had dinner with Dr. Oz the other night. I think it's fair to say he gets a lot of criticism, but I mean, he helped change my life. Like he was incredibly kind to me, and him and his team platformed me like at a time when his show was like at its peak of success, and they were just really interested in what I had to say, and they helped support my work. And all the segments that I did on his show, which I did a lot of segments on his show, were so evidence-based and so buttoned up, and really, I think, moved the needle for people in a huge way. They had me on after I had done the Kickstarter teaser and whatever. That was the first thing that they had me on to talk about, actually, my documentary project. It definitely wasn't overnight, but yeah, it really is. There's no formula for success, but it definitely was a testament to just how powerful it is when you decide to go all in on a thing.
Can you speak more to when you say there is no formula to success? I know that. But there's the spiritual things you can say when the time is right and all that kind of stuff. There's also the commit to the work and go all in. Is there anything else that if you were to look back and you would say, these are the particular decisions I made that I could replicate if I were to make a formula for what made you successful that maybe somebody could model off of?
You do have to go all in. I would look at people like who I'd actually known at the time, and I guess I still know him, but who I had spent some time around. I would think about guys like Jared Leto, multi-talented movie star, also rock star, also technologist.
Did you just climb a building for no reason recently?
He did do something like that. He did do something like that. Yeah.
It was like in the last couple of weeks.
He did do something like that. Yeah. I forget where I read that, but
sorry.
But yeah, no, I would think about like guys like him, and not that I'm comparing myself to Jared Leto. He's amazing. But
you're amazing too, Max.
Thank you. But he was a movie star first. He was like an actor first. Mm-hmm. And I became friendly at the time with Adrian Grenier. Same thing. He had this technology company, but he was an actor, so I wasn't an actor. I'm not an actor, but I realized that you really do have to like focus on the one thing. And there's going to be really dark days as you go down that path, whatever that path happens to look like for you. But ultimately, like the only shot you've got at succeeding at a thing is if you go all in. You can't half-ass it. There can't be a plan B. And so that was instrumental. And then also like really being diligent, like being really dedicated to the craft and doing your homework. Mm-hmm. I forfeited any semblance of a social life during that period. I wasn't dating. I had an on and off relationship in my life at that point, an ex-girlfriend, and she was incredibly supportive, to me, but we weren't together, and I had forfeited kind of that, like any semblance of a healthy relationship there. And I just was like dedicated to learning as much as I possibly could. And I was like talking about it constantly. Mm-hmm. So like I would like eat, breathe, live, sleep, like this topic, science, health, constantly Googling things, constantly, deep in the weeds on PubMed.
And going to events and talking to the right people.
Yeah, and just always honing mm-hmm. and always like obsessively, if I did a TV segment, obsessively rewatching it and criticizing myself almost to a fault, like critically looking at my content and being like, okay, there I used a word that was a little bit too certain when we don't actually have that level of certainty on this thing. Right. Like I should have used a different word. I should have used may instead of does.
Right. I'm doing that now. I'm rewatching all of these interviews and being hypercritical. And I was already hypercritical of myself before, even more so now. Little words, even the way I'll like hold a facial expression or hold my hands. And then I try to be kind to myself. But then I also think about anyone that I know personally that's successful, that I admire. Similar to you, I'm around a lot of really successful people who are just as obsessive. And I go, you know what? Worked for them. It'll work for me. I'm going to give myself the pass. And I try also not to be discouraged. I make the joke that, and this goes far beyond me even leaving corporate tech to do what I do now. People are like, why do you put so much pressure on yourself? I'm like, well, my ancestors made the pyramids. And I grew up in Silicon Valley, where your barometer of success is Facebook and Twitter and Salesforce. Like, if you don't do those things, that's my barometer. And so I'm trying to balance the critique with the fact that what has made me successful is being comfortable with not being perfect, being comfortable with not knowing. Those are all the things that get me into the room and get me my success. But when I now put myself in the seat where I'm putting the camera on me, then I, sometimes will even forget what I want to say even though because I get paralyzed by like I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I've been doing a lot of going back and reading all the transcripts and watching one interview 4 or 5 times and forgetting how amazing I did for an hour and 20 minutes and focusing on the 2 minutes I fucked up.
Yeah, well, it's very important to learn how to be self-critical, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also important to learn how to tune out the criticism of others, particularly those who you wouldn't take advice from. So I think it's important to be able to tune out the criticism of others, but to not be so deluded to not be able to criticize yourself and to look with a critical lens at your work and to try to see where you can improve. You know, I think that's super important. And then you're not going to be perfect and you'll always find things to criticize. So don't let that get in the way of putting your work out there, you know, because I wouldn't have learned had I had been too afraid to have gone on the Dr. Oz show. Any opportunity that's ever come to me that I've been, anxious or afraid about, I've still done nonetheless.
Right.
You know?
Right. Going back to the documentary, it was Breadhead.
Yeah.
And now it's called Little Empty Boxes.
Yeah.
And you did a screening.
Yeah.
But when does it become available for other people to see?
So we just, we raised a bit of money, which is going to help fund our theatrical release next year. So in 2024.
How exciting.
So like March, April, we haven't locked down an exact date yet, but we are going to be doing a theatrical release in select markets, and then we're going to have a direct-to-consumer window where people will be able to watch it online, and we're going to do that sort of like do-it-yourself model, and then hopefully we'll be able to get some attention from the streamers, but we don't necessarily need that, which is a really empowering place to be.
Mm-hmm. Very different place than when you first started.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked really hard to build a platform, and I don't feel like I need anybody at this point.
Right.
You know,
you did it right by not partnering with people or bringing on shareholders or aligning with any one company or anyone, like you from the mud.
Yeah, from the mud, literally. And I remember being so desperately in need of that kind of validation earlier on in my career.
Did.
You know, but no, I mean, the most powerful thing that you can be as a content creator is the owner of your IP. And to be able to call the shots.
Mm-hmm. That's why I went independent with the show. Started with a network and then pulled out and decided to go independent.
It's great.
It's stressful. I'm terrified for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with the work itself. But hopefully it'll pay off literally and figuratively. Leading up to Little Empty Boxes being available for public consumption, do you feel like it's a roller coaster going up to a sense of relief or a sense of excitement? Because it's a long time coming, long time making, and something so deeply personal and deeply impactful. And because you balance being a very sensitive person and someone who's also, as a matter of fact, leading up to that, what do you feel?
I definitely feel a sense of relief about finishing this project and getting it out. I'm incredibly proud of it, and it's gone through a number of different iterations. But I brought on a team who believed in me, who believed in the project, and helped me really bring it to a place where it is now, I think, a really powerful work of art and tribute to both my mom and the science of dementia prevention. And yeah, so I'm incredibly proud of it. I can't wait for people to see it. And it really, I mean, it's a time capsule for me at a time when I didn't know shit, where I was just a scared son and with a really incredible mom and so it's a testament to that, and I think it's a really human interest story about love and the things that we'll do for love in the name of love, and yeah, so I can't wait for it to be out and then to figure out what the next thing is. Yeah.
From a human experience element, someone asked me this question, asked you, and I really liked it. So there's the experience of a degenerative disease or diseases or somebody who is older and that train is coming. And so the question was, do you have any advice to help someone prioritize their wellness and their diet when they feel like there's no point? They're either too old or their disease is progressed too much where they feel like, what's the point? Because I think you and I don't feel that way. We're like, oh, like as the ship is sinking, let's make the right choices. But do you have any perspective or advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really have to be the master of your own destiny. And, I've definitely spent a lot of energy trying to, influence my mom's decisions, and that's probably a futile effort on many levels. I really think that rather than spin your wheels trying to change the behavior of others, which I know so many people want to do, right?
Out of love.
Out of love, your energy is always going to be best spent on, procuring your base.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very nerdy, but I'm a huge, I've become fairly recently a big fan of, and I really couldn't tell you why, to be honest, but I think I have some idea, but I became a huge fan of James Bond. Particularly the Daniel Craig.
Uh-huh.
I've got a bit of a man crush on Daniel Craig. It's not much of it. If you listen to my podcast, it's not really a secret. One of the things that I think James Bond embodies, and I read an article about this because I was trying to figure out, why is it that I resonate so much with this character? You have to concentrate on what you can control. And what that means is you have to secure your base. And so there's this article that I stumbled upon online, and Ian Fleming, who created the character James Bond, he wrote in Moonraker, whenever James had a job of work to do, he would take infinite pains beforehand to leave as little as possible to chance. Bond looks to achieve Clausewitz's first principle. So I don't know who this guy Clausewitz is, but he's presumably he's some kind of literary icon.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong there. I don't know. Maybe he's like a war hero. I have no clue. But his first principle is making his base secure. So, and this is something that James Bond embodies. Securing his base creates a personal headquarters that is well defended against external disruptions. So for Bond, this means finding out as much information about the people and places in a case as possible, partnering with competent allies, and making sure that his equipment is in working order. Vigorously training in the specific skills which an operation will require, and mentally visualizing beforehand exactly what moves he'll make. So essentially what that means is your first priority should always be securing your base, right? And I think this applies to all situations,
everything,
right?
Sports, stay ready,
Sports,
visualize what's going to happen
First
in the
principle.
game, all of that.
First principles, secure your base. And so
a lot of people self-sacrifice or put themselves out before they do that, and it's not a good position to help anyone from at all.
Now, I hadn't read that at the point when I was dealing with all this stuff with my mom, but I guess I might have intuited that in the sense that I distinctly remember very much making time for self-care at that point, and not letting what it was that my mom was going through impede on the necessity that I had to continue to sauna regularly, which I was doing and I love, if for no other reason than I love it. And how it makes me feel. I was, very much still working out all the time and doing all the things that I could do, so that when I would show up to my mom's apartment to be there for her, I was truly there for her in the best, as the best version of myself. And at a certain point, I realized that your loved ones have made decisions over the course of their life, and you can lead by example, and I think that's certainly valuable. But there's a quote from the Bible that it's impossible to be a prophet in your own land. I think a lot of us spin our wheels trying to change people, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make that horse drink. And ultimately, you don't want to sacrifice the relationship, which is the most important thing. So if I came home, to my mom's house like this anti-sugar zealot, and my mom during, her moments of despair, wanted a little bit of comfort in eating a cookie or whatever it was that she would bring her comfort at that point. And suddenly she would feel guilt or shame about it because Max was coming and she had to hide the cookies, which I think probably at a certain point happened in my house. Then that would be really terrible. And so at a certain point I realized that, thankfully, and I completely stepped back, and I would try to teach gently, but ultimately lead by example. And
I think that's really important for people to hear.
Yeah.
Because they don't realize they're creating the shame. they may not realize how much of a rift they're creating in the relationship, and they're missing out on time.
Yeah.
They're doing it out of love, right? They want that person to be healthy and stay here as long as possible. But you could damage the relationship in that process, and the outcome's the same. And then you've lost on precious time or precious connection.
Yeah.
I deal with that with my family. I have to just accept that they're all adults. They're going to make the decisions they want to make. And I don't want to fight them because time is so limited.
Totally.
Being someone who has shined a light on dementia and being someone that's so entrenched in health and wellness and diseases and autoimmune, is there anything that you're finding as you're going through your research that you think 5 or 10 years from now we'll be talking about that's lesser talked about now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it's starting to dawn on people that the ultra processed nature of our food environment has become really problematic, and that it's not so much. I think for a long time, probably since the popularization of the Atkins diet, there's been this constant battle of the macros where it's like, is it carbs that are killing us? Is it fat that's killing us?
Isn't it hilarious that we demonized every food group, and then now we're realizing that if they all kind of go together as our ancestors ate, our body handles it optimally?
Yeah.
Oh, the irony that if you just have a little bit of carb, a little bit of fat, and a little bit of protein paired together the way we intended, our body doesn't have crazy spikes and becomes adapted.
Exactly.
So I don't know why.
Yeah, and I say this as somebody who out of the gate probably was a little bit like carb phobic and drank.
Probably was. Let's just accept.
Yeah.
We learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid at a certain point, which is not to say that topics that I've written about in the past, like the ketogenic diet, are not valuable. I 100% maintain that this is a very important therapeutic tool to be potentially used.
Agree.
In
carnivore helped me with my pituitary tumor. Is it the thing that's going to sustain me long term? No, but while I'm in treatment,
right,
it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I think people think one thing's going to work and it works for a while, and when it stops working, they don't realize it's time to pivot. They just double down on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, your body's going to adapt. The things I'm stumbling upon or have kept my eye on for the last decade is the association between concussion and gut health, concussion and PCOS, and H. pylori, a lot of false negatives, and what that does to mimic autoimmune disease. And I'm going to have an expert come on where it's going to be more of a prescriptive episode. Have you come across any of those things? Because you're in studies as much as I am.
Yeah.
Anything there that you've come across?
Well, I think for brain health, the ketogenic diet is it's not a cure-all, but there's no, from the standpoint of like the neurophysiology of the brain, there's no other diet that so dramatically changes the brain's biochemistry like this diet does. Like you can be on any number, you could be on the Japanese diet, the Mediterranean diet, a lower carb diet, a vegan diet. They're all, from the standpoint of the brain, not much changes. But the ketogenic diet dramatically changes what's going on in the brain. From the standpoint of fuel oxidation, from the standpoint of, the upregulation of various purportedly neuroprotective compounds like BDNF or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which are potentially very important, in the context of conditions like, for example, TBI, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, maybe concussion.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have all the answers.
Right.
Like we definitely don't. But
you can optimize for those things or against those things.
Yeah. And you can make extrapolations based on other conditions that I think are worth making, particularly considering it's a diet. It's ultimately a safe diet. It's like safe. So it's not going to harm you to try a ketogenic diet if you have TBI or you have concussion, right? This isn't like I'm not telling you to take some crazy supplement or something like that.
Part of protocol when we have athletes that have that is having a period of time where it's AIP, ketogenic slanted, other recovery modalities and supplementation, but it's whether or not we know definitively, we know it optimizes for that. And we want to create the best case scenario, the best environment for recovery there. Because there's that window where it's really crucial to mitigate any longer term effects from that.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's more difficult to speak about because not enough people are speaking about it. And then there are some categories of sports where the doctors in-house are maybe they're behind. There's no way to other put it. They're like very focused on what they've known and haven't gone into current research. But talking about diets, you made a comment about how you're living out the fact that you've been a closet meathead.
Yeah.
So you've been getting super in shape, super shredded, usually tan, not today.
No.
But also focusing on conditioning more. Like you've taken your fitness a lot more seriously. So what do you mean that you're a closet meathead?
Yeah. Well, I started probably in mid high school. I became obsessed with fitness, and to the degree that, when I was in high school, so like this is 1998, I read a book about the ketogenic diet by Lyle. I wasn't on a ketogenic diet, but the ketogenic diet by Lyle McDonald, which is like one of the seminal books to really kind of reveal for the first time, all this incredible research about the ketogenic diet. I wrote my high school senior thesis on creatine monohydrate at that point. This is 1999,
We
2000.
have this in common because I wrote about the ADHD being an autoimmune disease in 7th grade and won a technical paper on it.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I was nerds. We're like,
I was obsessed.
But you became obsessed from that because you found that article. Because I became obsessed with autoimmune before I even knew I had an autoimmune disease. Because I was sitting in the dentist office and just saw an article that said ADHD is the disease of the century, and I was like, this is so dramatic. And then I decided to get nerdy about it. So for you, it was the book that did that, or was it the combination of the book while you're trying to get shredded?
I read this big, what ultimately I think was probably a supplement marketing book, but it read really as like a really exciting tome on sports performance and supplementation by Bill Phillips. And it was like, I forget the name of it, but it was like it was essentially like marketing a bunch of EAS supplements, but I was so excited by it, and I got really into working out at that point. I was into bodybuilding at the time. I was like in the bodybuilding news groups and stuff, and I never aspired to be an actual
Were you like?
I was
jacked?
pretty. I don't think my genetics are like lend themselves.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
What's your weight right now?
Currently, I'm 185.
And you leaned out, but you put on muscle in the last 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, I did a bit of like a body recomp earlier this year. I went from
started eating carbs.
Yeah. I started eating a lot more carbs. Yeah. I went from 15-16% body fat down to 9%. I got really lean. But in that process, I also put on some muscle, which is fairly rare for somebody who's been training his whole life. But I've also dialed up the intensity of my training in a really deliberate way.
Can you go into what you mean by intensity? Because that could mean something different for each person.
Yeah. So at a certain point, I think that there's a switch that flipped where I started looking at my workouts not necessarily as exercise, but more as training, which for a non-athlete like myself, you don't really think of your workouts as training. But I rather than just go and throw some weights around without any real plan, I started to really increase the weight that I was using and lower the rep range so that it's a lot easier for you to gauge it's a lot easier in a lower rep range to gauge your proximity to failure. So you can build muscle. There's a wide rep range now, we understand, where that hypertrophic stimulus occurs. But the one benefit I would say to using a lower rep range, well, there's two benefits. One, you tend to gain more strength in that lower rep range. But the second major benefit from a hypertrophy, which is muscle growth standpoint, is that it's way easier to gauge your proximity to failure. And so training as close as you can to failure. You don't have to necessarily go to failure on every set, but you really want to lift heavy and send that message to your muscles to adapt or die. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I've never really been all that comfortable in the lower rep range because it's more taxing. It's harder. Right. It's harder.
So anyone that's listening to this, you can go and listen to the episode with Jay Ferrugia because he talks about this.
He talks about this. Cool. So yeah, he's a professional.
Yes. So
it's
I love that
compliment to me as a non-professional.
It is. So you're going into exactly what he was talking about. And we talked about hip hop and a lot of other stuff. But when we got into training, he was going into this, how people get this wrong. So it's great that you're saying this and how it's been so effective for you. So people can go back to that episode and listen to us going into that place and also following his programming because he's not 50 yet. He would get some episodes he was 50, but he is shredded and keeps people shredded.
Yeah.
You guys should train together.
Yeah, I mean, the one risk is that the risk of injury increases, but if you're warming up and you're, doing it with good form.
He's a stickler about form. He'll
Yeah.
say lower rep, heavier weight
Yeah.
because you can control form.
So basically what I just shared is, one of the major variables that switched for me.
Why did you want to get into training in that way? Because you've always been in shape,
Yeah.
right? You eat well. What got you to get a little more deliberate about that?
I want to get jacked.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Boys will be boys.
I mean, is there any other reason?
No, because I'm about to get into I want to get jacked as my birthday approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to get swole.
Are you near your goal yet?
That's pretty much it. I mean, yeah, I'm very proud of my progress, and I'm never going to be like huge or super strong. I just don't have those genetics, but I am really thrilled with the progress that I've made.
Do you think
Just in the past year, and I've been training my whole life, but like making that switch for me, and also dialing up, my protein has been really helpful, but it's primarily just the change in my workouts, and also I've increased the volume somewhat in the sense that I think I probably, for most of my training, I would train each muscle group once a week. Now it's like a solid twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really increasing the volume and the intensity. And that right there, I mean, that's like the recipe. It's not magic.
I feel like you're in a really good place right now because you are feeling good. You're looking good. I made the comment the other day how you seem so much happier, or like you're glowing in photos. I assumed you were seeing someone because of that. I don't, or allowed to say this here. It wasn't totally wrong, but I wonder if all those things, securing your base, right? You got your foundation going. You upped your training. You have a routine you're into. You feel really secure about what's happening with your business and with the documentary coming up. And it shows.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy these days.
P.S. If you want me to cut out the part about you seeing someone, I can.
No, you don't have to cut out anything. I mean, I've been making progress in that world, which for a long time there was not much progress.
Even though everyone swears you and I have dated, which we have not. We're very good friends.
Yeah. For better or worse, I've prioritized other things over the past decade.
What is it like dating when you're purpose driven? Which, by the way, is also an episode with Mark Gross. We talked about dating while purpose driven.
Yeah. It's pretty hard. It's not a walk in the park.
For who? For them or you?
For them.
You're always honest. That's what I appreciate.
I've had a pretty good time, in that regard. But I've I think grown a lot in the sense that honesty, transparency have always been really important to me. But I think I've become a lot more transparent in my romantic dalliances, and also there's a lot of trauma that I had, like going through that thing with my mom, and
you became an uncle.
And yeah, so I mean, we all have our stuff that we have to like figure out and go through,
and you're in therapy, which I always promote therapy for everybody, which is a really big tool for everybody.
I was actually talking about this to a friend recently that when you're younger, and I can only speak for men because that's like my lived experience, but as a guy, you're kind of like the first third of your life you're spent trying to figure out like where you fit socially, who you are. Mm-hmm. Maybe you like women, maybe you don't. Like you're trying to figure out, there's all these like variables that you're trying to figure out that are like fundamental to who you are. And then once you've got that kind of figured out, then the next third, I think, is like, well, who am I professionally? What's my purpose? What am I here to do? Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, took a while for me to figure out, but I've figured it out. And I think I'm very much doing what it is that I'm here to do. But then after you kind of figure that out, which I feel very blessed, like I'm 41, I've figured out what it is that I'm here to do. I wake up every day super excited. I love my podcast. I've written 3 books that I'm super proud of.
I'm in 2 of them.
Yeah, your recipe is in, I've got this documentary that I'm incredibly proud of. So, there's all that. And now like the next stage, and maybe there are other phases. But I think after you've got that all figured out, then it's like, okay, well, you know, maybe it's time to figure out like the relationship thing, like, and like, you know, you don't want to be like alone, or maybe it's fine to be alone, but you don't want to be lonely, you know? And so it's like figuring out your relationship style and all that, like sort of like that side of things. And
human connection is huge. And if you're not in a romantic relationship, it doesn't mean you don't have connection to other humans and friendships and things like that. So it's, you don't want to settle.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to be alone. And alone doesn't mean without partner.
Right.
It's just without community. So I find that
Yeah.
you may not have been in relationships, but you have really good friendships and strong community. And at least that's what I use for myself, is that I don't ever feel like I'm lacking, because I do have such a great group of friends that I feel fulfilled in so many ways, including my career, that you just won't settle. Yeah,
definitely not. I mean, you shouldn't settle. You really shouldn't settle. But it can be hard to try to do, you know, it can be hard to embody, like if there's overlap in those phases, it can be difficult.
What do you
tricky
mean by
waters
that?
to navigate.
What do you mean?
Well, it's like, it was like,
overlap?
it would be really hard for me to have had a relationship, and I've tried to have like relationships when I was like more career focused and trying to figure out my career and my financial status and like all that stuff. But now I feel like I've figured all that out, you know, like which is not to say that I don't have other goals,
right?
You know, but there is a degree of like, at least it's like, there's a degree of, it's like, you know.
Do you think that's a heteronormative male perspective from like, I don't have my shit together, so I can't date type of thing? Or I guess how would you define having your shit together, right? Because there's people who have their mental, emotional shit together, right? They're rock solid, but they're building something.
Yeah.
And so you have always been pretty sound of mind and body, but you were building something. And so that building was, in your opinion, taking away from your ability to show up in a relationship.
Yeah. No, you don't have to. I mean, this isn't like about a number in the bank account or anything like that. It's just sometimes you encounter people who are like, I'm just going to cut the cord and go to Bali for 3 months, and then I'm going to come back, and then I'm, you know, working on this thing, and I've got
all
this.
Of West Hollywood. It's all of where you live. That's all of West Hollywood.
Yeah. Once you've got your thing and you figured that out, it's what's the word? It's like stability. You know, stability is sexy.
Yes, but there, like I said, there's focus, mental, physical stability, and then there's someone who's building something where that's not going to always be stable. Like, I always wonder about, like, can two entrepreneurs date each other? Because it's a lot of risk there from a stability standpoint, because entrepreneurs are taking risks with their careers. Some entrepreneurs are not stable in other ways, and we're not talking about them, but we're talking about the ones who are pretty rock solid, but it's a very, like, I'm building things. I know I have a lot of risk. I try not to involve anyone in the risks that I'm taking with my businesses, because they need to be my responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I don't think building something precludes being able to have a relationship, and
so
nor does entrepreneurship.
You could have had one then.
Yeah, but
we'll wait for the next, and we might cut all this out, but we'll wait for your next fortune cookie that gives you the inspiration for that stuff.
Love it. Yeah. I'm still figuring it out. Don't think for a second that I have all the answers. I don't.
I promise you, I don't think you have all the answers.
I do not. I might sound convincing. Might be the baritone in which I speak, but
yes, you say things in such an authoritative way that one must assume it's fact and true.
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming I can curse on this.
Yeah, 100%.
One of my favorite lines from Ozark is when one of the main characters, Ruth, goes, "I don't know shit about fuck,"
yes.
Or I don't know fuck about shit, and that's how I feel about most topics. Just to be very clear,
I think we brought this up when I was on yours. I don't know anything about most things.
Yeah,
is what you said.
That's 100%
amazing.
How I feel about the vast.
But in general,
topics.
You feel really good right now. And Eat, Play, Crush, I want to focus more on Crush Life, but there's the eat and play component of it.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling really good, I'm all about building healthy habits. what is in your habit stack right now? What are your non-negotiables for the day? I shy away from like morning routine because it's become so kind of ridiculous, but like what are your non-negotiables in your habit stacks, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly?
Well, for me, I need to have a good workout. So for me, that's like heavy resistance training. I'm just like obsessed. I love it. I'm like in the gym, not like for an extended period of time, but I love like getting in there for an hour and throwing weights around, and then following that up with like a really healthy, delicious, high protein lunch.
You've been cooking a lot.
Yeah, I've been cooking a fair amount. At this point, I get like all kinds of crazy, great, high quality like meat and stuff sent my way. So I love to meal prep, and cooking at home is such a cheat code for getting jacked and for like fat loss. You know, when you eat it out at restaurants, you're just inevitably eating all kinds of phantom calories from whether it's oils, sugary sauces, creams, aiolis. Delicious, you know, not saying it's not tasty, you know, to eat at a restaurant compared to your house, but that's often because chefs load, you know, their foods up, their recipes up with like butter and stuff like that.
But I also think you stunt your taste buds. That's why I love doing like palate resets.
Yeah.
Where you really start to appreciate food simply, or you appreciate the actual texture and taste of an herb and this spice and that spice. Because if you're just throwing everything that is like satiating to your taste buds, you then need more of it, more sugar, more salt, more vinegar. And you can bring it down to a baseline, because my favorite meal is just a steak with some salt, a little dab of butter, a little dab of, like tiniest dab of honey, and like sauteed onions and mushrooms. I'm really happy with that.
You came to my house and we cooked up a steak and we made like liver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
we've done liver, we've done steak. We did a whole bunch of different cuts once.
Yeah.
And then I think we did baklava another time.
Oh my God.
You guys came, you and Taro came to my pop-up where I had the lamb, the turmeric lamb, braised lamb, and then you guys had like 5 pounds of leftover tartare. Do you remember that at my house?
I do remember that, yeah.
Just you and Taro just going to town on it.
So good. I love tartare.
You should approach playing with tartare next in your kitchen. It's a lot of fun to make at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never made it.
Or a carpaccio is a lot of fun to make at home too. It's like a little event, little social media post.
Damn.
But maybe is the next place you enter into the world of the culinary arts?
I would be super down. I mean, it would be a logical progression from my cookbook, but I don't, I think the restaurant world is like really cutthroat and tough, but I definitely, something like that does sound fun to me because I do enjoy eating out. So if I could partake in that world in some capacity, that would be really fun to me. But yeah, I think like eating home and cultivating the craft of knowing how to cook simple single ingredient foods seasoned with just a handful of herbs or spices.
What are your favorite herbs and favorite spices?
I love just like meat and salt, or vegetables with salt, pepper, garlic, maybe a little bit of extra virgin olive oil.
Your favorite veggies? What are they?
Favorite vegetable is probably fennel. I love fennel bulbs. Yeah, and raw. It's just so good.
You would be a fennel guy.
Yeah, I love fennel.
Fennel and citrus. I like fennel and
citrus.
like orange with that.
Same. I love dark leafy greens. I love like carrots, celery.
Carrots are
almonds.
Great. Almonds. Let's go back to that debate. That caused quite a stir, the difference between almonds and almonds.
Yeah. Jury's still out. But
I think they're both right.
Yeah.
So your non-negotiable stack of habits is a good workout, a good meal, and part of that habit is prepping for yourself.
Yeah, if I start my day with a good workout followed by a good high protein lunch, I feel on top of the world.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
To build upon that.
Yeah.
That's a good base for your bond.
And I do eat
lifestyle.
something before I go work out. I used to be a big fasted exerciser, but now I've seen the value in pre-workout.
You're eating oatmeal.
Yeah, eating like some
How
carbs.
will you survive?
Well,
oatmeal is killing us.
I know. There's nothing like magical about oatmeal, but there is good evidence that suggests that it's beneficial from a health standpoint. There's like beta-glucan in it, which is like immunomodulatory. It's a good source of fiber. It's also fairly easy to digest and a good source of starch, which is like glucose for
some of my athletes get oatmeal. We don't do full oatmeal. I'll do a cut where it's oats, hemp, chia, flax, and then we'll do some sort of non-dairy milk, and then I'll do collagen, protein, and a different array of adaptogens depending on the athlete. But again, my athletes are exerting a ton of energy, but the way that combination of oats and then those other seeds sit really well in their stomach, and they notice a difference.
It's so satiating, you know, and I think that's really important.
And it's easy.
And people are like, well, what about the protein? I'm like, yeah, I mix protein powder in it. And they're like, well, oats are so sugary. I'm like, well, there's sugary instant oats, and then there's like no sugar added oats.
There's always a but and a what about. Yeah. And I'm not interested people in the like, buts and the what abouts.
Same. Because it's like it's like, there's glyphosate in oats. Well, you can buy organic glyphosate-free oats. Well, there's gluten in oats, and I'm celiac out there. You could buy gluten-free.
Somebody was freaking out over me posting a spotlight on beets.
Beets are great.
And I'm like, but beets and
oxalates.
It's really exhausting. And so I do respond to those comments. I'm like, if you have an issue with that, if you're concerned with that, this post is not for you.
Yeah.
Keep it moving.
I mean, you take 100 people and you give them each a peanut. Mm-hmm. One or two of them are going to die. Does that mean that, peanuts are the worst thing ever?
I get into debate.
Homicidal peanuts.
Right. But I feel this way about sugar. I did that poem that I wrote where monk fruit tastes terrible, stevia too. Sugar's not the problem. It's how much you consume. Thank you. Yeah. Pissed off so many people because I don't like how stevia tastes. I don't like how monk fruit tastes. I also don't like how sweet it is on your palate because now you're stunting how other foods should taste. And also just consume less honey, less maple. Half a teaspoon of honey in tea, if you're not eating a ton of monk fruit, you'll taste the honey. And then you don't have to worry about how horrible sugar is. I get for somebody who's not in the industry that we're in, that doesn't look at labels, there is a lot of sugar in a lot of things, but sugar isn't innately terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
In ancient Egypt, a dessert would be half a date, and that's it. That was your treat, and it was reserved to those of status, and that was it. I admit, you put a container of dates in front of me, they're not lasting, and that's my problem. Yeah, it's not the date, it's me.
Oh my God, I love dates. Medjool dates. Jesus.
Oh yeah. There's hundreds of different variations of dates, and they're different textures, different colors, different levels of sweetness. It's almost like wine tasting. I did a post about all the different types of dates, and I make a really dope Snickers, like beautiful Snickers for my athletes using dates.
Well, let's be real. Like medjool dates they slap. Those are like the best.
No, there's these Sakkari dates that are beautiful orange, and they taste like caramel.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Good to know.
I feel like you've only had medjool dates.
Maybe.
But I also like in Egypt during Easter, we have dates before they're dried too, when they're still on, and those are really delicious as well. And they're not obviously not as sweet, and the crunch on them and the fiber on them is really good.
Damn.
That doesn't last very long with me either.
Dates are the best.
So you are talking about coming to this precipice of the documentary coming out, and like I'm so glad I didn't ask you about the top 5 foods, et cetera, that people can find all over your social media. Like, what is it that you want to experiment with or do next? Because everyone's going to expect you to do something else in health. Yeah. So are you going to give them that and then also do what you want to do? Or are you going to like ride off into the sunset, the hero's farewell?
Yeah, no, I don't know what the next step is. I probably should start thinking about like the next book, because I do think that, my thinking has evolved. Not that everything I've written in the past that I've like done a 180 on, certainly not. But, I think there still continues to be, especially compared to when I first got into this world on social media, there are a lot of people trying to be like wellness influencers and things like that. And I think there's a lot of like potentially harmful like misinformation out there about diet, lifestyle, and the diet tribalism, I think, can be really toxic. Veganism, carnivore, like I just think it's like really it's become very dogmatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most pressing issues facing society today is just the overwhelming incidence of obesity and type 2 diabetes. So doing like a book that kind of separates fact from fiction with regard to like fat loss is something that has become, I think increasingly important to me.
Do you think the book's the right medium for you because you translate so well on screen? Should it be a show, a reality show, a documentary?
Well, yes, but I have no control over that. I would love to do that. That would be like a bucket list thing, like
I'm calling my agent after this. He's non-scripted TV.
To circle back and do like TV, that would be a dream. That would be like a dream.
Joe, we're calling you after this.
Yeah, but I have no control over that. And
Max, do you want to do a show together?
I'd be down.
That would be so fun.
Let's go. Yeah, I would love to do more. I mean, I do a fair amount of TV as it is, which I love. I get to do the Today Show and things like that, which is great. But to do some kind of like serial show would be amazing. But I don't know what that is going to look like. So I just I'm very proud of my podcast. I love putting that content out week after week, and seeing the feedback that I get from that is just incredible.
Any advice for me being 4 episodes in?
I think you're doing great.
Thanks.
Yeah. The most important thing to be as a podcast host is a good listener and to be very present. And you're both of those things. So
appreciate it.
Yeah. Good job. Mary Shenouda for the win.
Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
You're the best. Thanks for having me. And I wish you all the best for this venture. I know it's going to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're a rock star. People can check me out on Instagram. People can listen to my podcast, which is called The Genius Life. And
you're just Max Lugavere on Instagram?
Yeah, just Max Lugavere on Instagram.
Are you on X? Do you play on X?
Yeah, I'm on X. At Max Lugavere, also there. I got a YouTube channel where we put my podcasts up in full 4K glory.
If anyone doesn't know of you or your podcast, it is incredibly valuable, if not one of the most valuable health podcasts out there.
And we had a great conversation on my show, so people can go and check out like me interviewing you. That would be a fun place to start.
We'll link it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then if people sign up for your newsletter, this is when they'll know when the documentary is available.
Yeah. So my newsletter, you can join at my website. We send out every Friday, actually, a newsletter of like, it's sort of like a 5-bullet Friday.
I'm on it. It's meaty.
Yeah.
It makes me feel inadequate.
No.
When I read, I'm like, gosh, darn it, I have a lot of work to do with my newsletter.
Yeah, put a lot of work into it. It's always like science-based, things like that. So
and human. It's not like I'm reading a technical paper.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote it.
I love that.
Yeah.
So that's the point.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that is it on today's episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. Your time and attention never goes unappreciated. If anything in today's show stood out to you, I encourage you to share it to social and tag me. That is how you can help a little independent show like mine grow. And of course, rate, review, and subscribe to Eat, Play, Crush wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you want to follow me, I'm at Paleo Chef on social media or the show at Eat, Play, Crush. You want to stay in touch via my newsletter or get your hands on the gut reset, visit eatplaycrush.com. And until next time, be well, do good, and trust your gut.